of this training, let Joe know or let Pete know, and we're happy to get an answer back. And if you've had the question, somebody else probably had the question too, so please ask. And, you know, ask today so we can get it all covered if we need to. I just wanted to take a few minutes and tell you about how we're laid out here in Florida. As well as some of the other states out there, we are split up into several districts. Because of that, each district has an environmental team that handles consultants that handle the environmental documents as they come up for review. What you see on the screen here is the OEM, the Office of Environmental Management staff here in Tallahassee. You see me there at the top and my assistant next to me. But what we do is we have 4 big sections. I like to think of the 2 in the middle separately. So let's start on my left with quality assurance and performance section. You see Pete there. That is, I like to call it our jack of all trades kind of section. They handle all of our computer systems. They handle our QA/QC. They handle all our contracting and our admin. It's all rolled up there. He has a hand in kind of everything else we do. Then if you bear with me, I'm going to jump to the far right. It's Victor Muchariza, and it's the engineering section. I think this is a really important group that we have that may not have been as prevalent in years past, but we basically have engineers that are assigned to every district that sit hand in hand with our environmental specialists and review the documentation. I think it's really important because then you have a set of engineering eyes looking at an environmental document, so you don't have to wait till later on in design where an engineer says, hey, you can't do that even though you want to. So that's really important. Victor does an excellent job managing that unit. Then you see 2 sections in the middle. People laugh at me because I refer to them as my environmental scientists, because that's really what they are. They're all our environmental specialists, 2 teams, one led by Margie and one led by Katasha. We have a PDC assigned to every district in the state. That way those project delivery coordinators can have an intimate knowledge of what's going on in their district, and they can build the relationships with the districts, therefore they can have a better understanding of what's happening. Every PDC is assigned a district. We also have backups assigned within there, and then as I said, you have engineers also assigned in there. That's kind of how we're laid out. I think it's important to note here for the training that there's a lot of levels of review before a document is finally signed, and this is just what you see here in the Office of Environmental Management. So basically every document comes to a PDC and a backup and an engineer, and then both of the administrators, Margie and Katasha, sign and look at that document before it comes up for signature. That's not counting the several levels of review in each district before they can even be allowed to send it up. On that note, thank you all for attending, and I'm going to turn it back to Pete so we can get into the meat and potatoes of the training.
Great. Thank you, Jason. And let me just get out of here for a second. Go back together. Okay, so let's just talk through a couple of logistics, and then we're going to start handing it over to the rest of the supervisors to kind of walk through the department processes. It's a webinar, go-to meeting. You guys are all on. I know this says on mute, but you're not. You guys can ask questions and sort of jump in the whole thing, and Jason was very eloquent in the way he described it as this training is for you. We want to make sure you walk away with your understanding. So if you've got questions, let us know whether you want to put that into the text, whether they and chat box, or whether you want to just jump in. It's completely fine. We're going to take as much time as needed to make sure you guys have a common understanding of things. We're also actively recording this session, just like we did last year, and we'll put it out there on our website so it's accessible. So anybody who couldn't necessarily attend the training, you know, everyone's got lots and lots of things that are going on. You're probably going to have lots of things going on over the next few months, and it may be a little while before you look at the site and you start interacting with things, but you'll have this resource that you'll be able to immediately access and reacquaint yourself with, one, how does FDOT do business, but also how does the SWEPT application work as well. Some of the things we're intending to cover within this section, how do we comply with things, what are our processes, we're going to talk about the statewide environmental project tracker, and then we're going to show you guys as the FHWA audit team, we're going to log into the system as yourselves and kind of show you how to interact with the site. Before we get going, does anybody have any questions? Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Margie, who's going to cover the first part of how does FDOT comply with NEPA.
Okay, I'm going to move a little closer to the phone too, so you can hear me. A lot of what I'll cover in this portion, I know our Florida division folks are very familiar with, so please bear with me and color commentate if you like. Basically, thank you, Pete. Basically, FDOT has had a very robust environmental program for many years, PD&E manual that we use as our guidance for conducting evaluations that comply with the National Environmental Policy Act is memorialized in our Project Development and Environment Manual. So we call this process a PD&E process. It is our way of complying with NEPA. And again, our FHWA Florida division folks here are very familiar with that manual, and it's been in use for many years. It provides a framework for consistent environmental documentation. We talk about both federal and non-federal actions and how to advance documents in the manual. And of course, the environmental documentation depends on the specific project and its impacts. As Jason noted, the FDOT has 7 districts in the Turnpike who do the project level work. And here at Office of Environmental Management and Central Office, we have traditionally taken on the role of updating, maintaining the manual, working with FHWA and guidance development, application, and providing training, and now in the role of NEPA assignment. We've had that very natural separation between the districts and ourselves for environmental review. So the manual is 2 parts. It's volume 1 talks about process and documentation, classes of action, and procedure. Volume 2 gets into how to analyze specific subject areas. For example, there is a chapter in Volume 2 on contamination, one on wildlife and habitat, air quality, noise. So essentially when preparing an environmental document or going through what the FDOT calls a PD&E study, we wind up looking at both volumes, the format, the content of the document, and then the technical aspects in Volume 2. I want to give you a little bit of an overview. Our project delivery pipeline is not that different from other states. We have major phases: planning, PD&E, where the NEPA analysis happens, design, right-of-way, and construction. And you can see on this crosswalk there are sub-processes that run concurrently. They overlap these phases and essentially provide linkage from one phase to another. Certainly you see, for example, public involvement, outreach, interagency coordination runs the gamut. As we clearly recognize our interagency coordination starts in planning, goes all the way through permitting, for example, and beyond. So talking about the planning phase, pre-NEPA, of course, Florida has a Florida Transportation Plan, the 50-year horizon. That's more of a policy and vision paper. It's for all transportation elements in Florida, not just highways. Very stakeholder-driven. Again, it's a policy document. Our MPOs, our TPOs, developed cost-feasible plans for the 15-year horizon on projects that will be moving forward. We have a strategic intermodal system plan and its own cost-feasible plan for those corridors that, on a regional level, provide economic stimulation. They include freight hubs, transit hubs, really regional connectivity. And as in addition to these things, as we drill down further, our TPOs prepare transportation improvement plans, the 5-year plans that feed our FDOT 5-year work program, and ultimately the 4-year federally approved state transportation improvement plan. So it's the hierarchy of how projects are born, how they are fed into what would ultimately be the PD&E or the pipeline. This is how we know a PD&E project is coming. It would be listed in the TIP. That relates back to planning consistency as well. So the planning phase, of course, we're recognize the importance of planning and environmental linkages. We have several mechanisms that work towards supporting this. Preliminary environmental discussions are a part of ETDM screenings where our districts note what they know about a project. They enter this into the ETDM screening events. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more. The SWOT process has key meeting opportunities at very specific points in time, very purposed meetings to assist with scope of services development and streamlining environmental activities. The alternative corridor evaluation process, talk about that a little bit more as well. It's really when a project is, for example, a new alignment or capacity improvement that may have multiple alternatives that can be reviewed early, potentially eliminating unreasonable alternatives with lots of stakeholder involvement and inclusion of stakeholders and agencies in developing a range of alternatives and purpose and need, and then ultimately scope of work for PD&E. A little more about the planning phase. Again, we'll be looking to seek to refine the project, parameters, the limits, logical termini, purpose and need. Look at the project area, kind of flesh out new alternatives for further consideration. And again, focus that PD&E phase scope of work. Recognizing that planning decisions need to be disclosed, transparent, inclusive to form the basis for a NEPA study to be used as a precursor to NEPA decisions. This is a well-loved diagram. This is our Florida's ETDM process, efficient transportation making process, has been in place for about 15 years now.
Yep.
And it's essentially an interactive, web-based GIS, lots of layers of GIS information in this system where very early on a planning screen can be shared with our resource agency counterparts where we give a first blush description of the proposed project, get some initial feedback. This would typically be done before a project enters the work program, may be done by MPO or TPO or the department. Programming screen is typically run by the department. Once a project's initially in the work program, again, we're providing more refined information here, getting more refined commentary back. And then this information is used, as mentioned before, to form the basis of the PD&E phase and the scope. And I have a few more slides on this topic, so we'll go on. ETDM really began with a memorandum of understanding with multiple agencies and the FDOT and FHWA. And through this, we established an environmental technical advisory team where participating agencies in ETDM appoint individuals to comment on these screening events and look at the areas under their jurisdiction and give us meaningful comments on our projects before we start. We run these screening events on qualifying projects. And not all projects, but capacity improvements, new alignments, those types of projects you might typically think of as type 2 CEs, and certainly EAs and EISs, applicable type 2 CEs. So again, it's Florida's process for incorporating environmental considerations into our project planning. And it meets a lot of those federal statutory requirements. For example, early on, it met the road safety requirements of having a coordination plan. It provides for that inclusive consideration of range of alternatives and understanding of purpose and need. So these processes are memorialized. We have a wonderful ETDM manual that's available for your review and resource. Again, it talks about those projects that are qualifying. It goes into more detail about the planning screen and programming screen. And you can see that described as I've already mentioned. A little more on alternative corridor evaluation. This was something Florida DOT developed about 7 or 8 years ago. It is a process that rides along beautifully within the ETDM platform. It is one where we can propose a range of alternatives, work with the ETAT agencies and stakeholders in getting a sense of important resources to consider in developing a methodology memorandum on how to evaluate proposed corridors, and get a sense of concurrence on appropriate range of alternatives. Again, using ETDM as a vehicle for accomplishing that. Again, the system, the tool has lots and lots of ready GIS information, as well as a great communication forum. So as we move into NEPA, one of the products of an ETDM planning screen is going forward and establishing an environmental class of action. And by this time, we have a pretty good idea of what our issues are, what our potential impacts may be in terms of context and intensity. And so these should all look very familiar to our FHWA counterparts as classes of action. These are, I will point out in Florida, the middle category, the Class 2 categorical exclusions, we do have the Type 1 CEs, and these are essentially the listed CEs. They're prepared by our district offices. There is a form, a tool in SWEP that Pete will be going through. And those environmental certifications are done at the district level, although they are, again, you will see those documents in SWEP. The Type 2 CEs are our documented CEs in Florida. And again, you will see those documents in SWEP, and those do come to our Office of Environmental Management for review and approval. As do the EA documents and EIS documents. So more with the PD&E phase, again, and what we call our NEPA phase here. Building on prior planning screens. As with other NEPA processes, we look for that recommended alternative for design, conduct that initial permit coordination, of course recognizing some of that new guidance on streamlining permitting during planning and PD&E. Our processes, again, are outlined in our PD&E manual. Thank you. That in mind, our documents satisfy NEPA. Actions are fully described, disclosed. We look at that, you know, the hard look, and disclosure as being paramount considerations in NEPA. Involve stakeholders, and we make sure the environment, you know, the study is considers all of the environmental aspects and make sure they're appropriately evaluated, and that the consultation that occurs with the state, federal agencies, tribal partners, others, is completed. For example, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service consultation, State Historic Preservation Office consultation, key documents that need to be reflected, and processes that need to be reflected and summarized in our overall environmental document. And you will find those consultation letters attached to the documents you review as part of the audit. You will also see supporting information as attachments in the swept file. Okay, so the in accordance with PD&E manual and CEQ guidance, all of the above, our NEPA documents consider the natural, social, physical, and environmental impacts. Indirect and cumulative effects are considered with those where appropriate, on those appropriate level of documents, and the types of resources and actions that would trigger those more in-depth cumulative effects reviews. Federal findings are documented, as I mentioned earlier, and the alternatives analysis is done in a balanced way, consistent with NEPA, balanced decision-making, public disclosure, and overall, the NEPA process works as it's intended to work. You have to let the process accomplish what it's designed to accomplish, so that the balanced decision-making can occur and the intent of NEPA is satisfied. So the NEPA study lays the groundwork to obtain the appropriate agency permits. And given that we have good agency involvement even before we start the PD&E process, I'd say that's generally a very successful approach. There are no surprises, and you know, I think we have a very mature process for streamlining permitting considerations during PD&E, and certainly identifying mitigation needs and opportunities. During the design phase, moving on, throughout design, right-of-way construction, there are certain times when we would prepare our districts would prepare a reevaluation. Those documents would also come to this office for review and approval. As final design plans are prepared, for example, if there is a major design change, we want to be sure that the record is updated, and that type of reevaluation would come to us. Sometimes we can overlap a certain amount of design with PD&E as recognized by the FHWA executive order. Of course, that's going to depend on the amount of risk and the appropriateness of the project. If it's, for example, a documented CE, that's more ripe for that type of opportunity than an EIS would be. Again, maintaining consistency with project commitments. We do have project commitment record procedures in place, and the NEPA document also updates commitment status as they're made. Our design guidance is memorialized in the Florida Design Manual and the Florida Green Book. Right-of-way phase involves appraisal, negotiation, acquisition, all of those things that you're familiar with, ensuring adequate notice to property owners, compliance with the Uniform Relocation Act. Certainly, again, if there's a major design change and any impacts or changes to right-of-way needs and relocations are noted and discussed in reevaluation documents. Utilities are considered in our documents. And, of course, during construction, Florida has various methods of advancing to construction. We do design, bid, build projects, but we've also been very active with design build projects. That's not a new concept to FDOT. So, of course, we go forward, construct, deliver the facility, complete mitigation, and assure that commitments are implemented. And lastly, Florida does have work with, through FHWA with the local agency program, or LAP program. I will say that at this level, FDOT does do the environmental documentation, has that entered into SWEPT, and in either of our forms. For example, a type 1 form would be completed, and for a LAP project, if that's the appropriate class of action, and then ultimately the district environmental manager would certify that job, so the FDOT still maintains that oversight of LAP projects. So with that, that is a whirlwind overview of the FDOT's environmental documentation, or NEPA process. I'll just pause for a moment before turning it over to Katasha for any comments or questions. All sounds familiar?
Well, at least for you guys. At least the people in the room, they're like, yes, we know this process very well. But for those that are not from Florida, that was a lot of information. And again, another great reason why we recorded the information. Should you ever want to go back and say, well, how does Florida do it on this project? What's their overall transportation delivery process? And what are the components and stuff? So not hearing any questions. Thanks, Margie.
Thank you.
And we're going to ask Katasha over. She's going to talk about, so you talked about everything that we do in Florida, and then we're going to talk about how those turn into documents and how they flow through the process and get through approval. And eventually, when we get to SWEPT, I'll actually physically show you how we do these things. So that being said, thanks, Katasha.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Cool. So Margie and Jason kind of talked about how we're decentralized with the districts preparing the documents, and kind of showed the org chart earlier. This is just a little bit of a different organization of that, so you guys can kind of understand again how we're set up for the review process. Our project delivery coordinators are generally assigned to a district with the backup, as we kind of mentioned earlier, as well as an engineering lead that supports them to do environmental document reviews, support the districts in any questions and support that they need. We also have the administrative folks that were introduced to you earlier, so you can see that we've got Margie and myself down there as kind of a second level review of the environmental documents before they go on to Jason, our director, for final approval. We also have our Office of General Counsel staff available to us for those reviews that require their support, or even for reviews where we need, we feel that would be helpful for them to take a look at the document, or where they maybe see some issues that they would like to be supporting us on. So we have, as mentioned earlier, a lot of different levels of opportunity for review, and this is kind of how we're structured. So with that, we'll kind of walk through a higher level version of our review process, starting with some of the areas that Margie was kind of just going over. So the green boxes are areas that the district is responsible for, with the blue boxes areas where OEM is involved. And so we're starting out this really preliminary part of the project development process, the EPDM screenings that she mentioned, determining our class of action, going through project initiation on that top row all the way through the point where we're developing the environmental document. So obviously there's a lot happening in that top row. There's a lot of public involvement, outreach, there's, you know, the technical studies that it shows there, there's all the environmental analysis. So all of that process is happening to develop that PD&E study, that NEPA document, to get that environmental document prepared for that second row where the district is starting to really do their more formalized QC before it comes to our office for review. So that will be kind of that next couple of steps will be what we're going to refer to as our initial review of the document before we get to the public hearing. And so Margie had mentioned the difference between, for our CEs, we have a type 2 CE for the documented CEs that we do. Those don't go through necessarily review at our level prior to the public hearing unless the district requests support. So you can think of the second row review process as happening for environmental assessments and draft EISs. But we will get that document for review. Again, that first blue box on the second row. If we need legal support to review that document, subject matter experts, that review, that initial review will happen there. There'll be some comment resolution period that happens where the district may have to go back and update that document to address some comments that we will have. And then that'll come back to OEM and again legal when necessary, and or they're supporting us for particular issues to get that final public availability document. And again, that submittal will come in through the SWEP system that you guys will see for official signature by Jason, the director, to go to the public hearing. So once the district has had the opportunity to go through the public hearing, we're going to start moving on to that third row where they'll take back the feedback, they'll address any changes that they need to update to the final environmental document. This would happen, you know, they're going to update their type 2 CEs also if they need to, and they'll start submitting, they'll get that document prepared and submit it again to the Office of Environmental Management. So that project delivery coordinator and that engineer, again, subject matter experts if necessary, will do this initial review of that document. So at this level, we're thinking of a type 2 CE, we're thinking of a FONSI, we're thinking of a final EIS coming through the review where, again, that kind of initial review is happening. We move on to the district, resolving our comments, and getting that final document really ready for that approval process to come back through for legal sufficiency when necessary, and then the administrators, so Margie, myself, reviewing to move on to Jason for that final document signature, and then of course any additional sort of actions that need to take place once that document's been approved. So this just goes a little bit more in depth about the very specific steps. We talked kind of a little bit about the initial review and the final review on that last slide, but this goes through a little bit more specific details. So think about that first row on the last slide where all the document had been prepared, and we're kind of starting at that point now where on this slide the blue is the district and the green is OEM. But the district is now getting ready to get their document drafted. You know, if you're developing an EA or an EIS, of course you're kind of drafting along the way, but you're kind of finalizing that document for that review process to be taking place. The names and the roles that you see up here are really the roles that people are kind of assigned to in the SWEP system. So don't see project editor and kind of get like hung up on that name. Those people in the district, that's not their title per se. Those are just the roles that they're usually assigned to within the SWEP.
Just to kind of add on to that, because it's kind of important. When we show you SWEPT, right, everybody who logs into SWEPT has a username and a password. That username and password is tied to what role they have within the system. What role they have within the system provides them access and responsibilities based on who they are. So for instance, when Jason logs in, he's the director of the Office of Environmental Management. He's the only one, his role, his access is the only one that can sign a document, but the fact that he logged into the system, it knows that it's him. It only opens or closes things according to who you are when you log in. It's all rules-based.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. So again, kind of going along step number one, the district's kind of preparing that document, and step number two is where that district is working to, again, kind of do their final QC check, go through the certification where they're actually filling out what we call an environmental document submittal form, an EDS form. The project development manager and district environmental manager are signing off, telling us that that document's ready for review. And that document will then get sent to the project delivery coordinator as well as the engineer, but primary contact will be the PDC. Once the PDC gets notified that that document's ready for review, they have an opportunity to go in and confirm that submittal. And the system that we're using for this is our initial review. So steps 3 and 4 is our OEM initial review. We're using a system called ERC. I don't think we've said that acronym yet, but the electronic review comment system to kind of do that initial look. Again, project delivery coordinator, engineering lead, subject matter experts if necessary, OGC if we need that support as well. They're reviewing that document. And here we could be looking at the type 2, we could be looking at a reeval. So this process is happening for all levels of documentation, just depending on where they fall in that last chart we were looking at. There's comment resolution again, if if necessary. There's almost always some amount of comments that we're providing back, and so the OEM will submit the comments. So that last box on line 3, OEM is going to submit their comments to the district, and then the district will take the time they need to prepare responses to those comments, and then send that back to that same team that looked at and provided the comments, and make sure that those comments have been resolved. So that's, again, the initial review process. So once that initial review process takes place, we're ready for the district to go ahead and send their environmental document through the SWEPT process for approval, so the final approval process. That district project manager will send that document back through those same district management folks to basically certify that project's ready for the final review using that same environmental document submittal form. And that project delivery coordinator will get that notification again that says, hey, this is ready for your final review. So again, you can see here the different levels of documents that that applies to. So here we are on line 6, where the project delivery coordinator has the opportunity to just triple check that the comments from the previous review have been addressed. If for some reason the district maybe misinterpreted something, or just there was, a couple of small things that didn't get addressed quite right, we have an opportunity for what we call minor edits, which is this little circle here. And so the district will be able to just reopen the document, address those minor edits, close that document back. It remains in that exact same status as it was in before, still with that project delivery coordinator. Those couple of minor edits have been addressed. The project delivery coordinator can then, we like to call it push the button, but can then transmit that document down to the administrative review. So Margie and myself would then have that document to officially begin our review. If for some reason something outrageous happens, the process didn't work up here where we're resolving comments, we do have the opportunity to return the document back to the district, say this was not ready for review, and then we'll go back through that whole certification process and come back to the project delivery coordinator. So, typically, we're able to handle any of those last little things through the minor edits process. So again, if that has come back through to the administrator's level for review, Margie and myself, we also have an opportunity for minor edits. If there's, we're basically looking for some consistency issues. We're looking for clarity. The districts and the project delivery coordinators and engineers are really a lot closer to the project details sometimes, and on occasion something might come through that's maybe not quite, we're reading it and we just need a little more clarity, a little more understanding. So those are the kind of minor edit things that we might be sending back for. And then once we have confirmed that and recommended that for approval, it will go back through for Jason to actually sign off on that document. I am going to stop here just for a second and see if there are any questions about that, because also there's a lot. We have one more slide that I'm going to talk about, but seems straightforward. Nobody else has popped up a question, right?
Not that I've seen.
Okay.
No hand up. You're good.
Okay. So the last slide is a lot more straightforward, where the type 1 CEs that we talked about earlier, and I think Margie mentioned, are approved by the district. They have a similar process as we saw in the last slide for steps 1 and 2. Those similar district folks, the same roles within SWEPT, are able to go in and fill out, and as we mentioned earlier, Pete will show you the form itself. They'll be able to fill out the form and upload the appropriate documents to the project in the project file, and then go through that similar QC check where they're doing their certification. Their project manager signs off and sends it to their district environmental manager for them to approve that type 1 CE at that level. So it's a little more streamlined process for those documents.
Class of actions determined in the districts or in coordination with central office?
But yeah, in coordination with OEM, there's a process within the EPDM system that they can send us a recommendation, and then we would accept that.
Exactly. So and there's some controls in place within EPDM. So for instance, in order for us to concur on a particular class of action, we must have already accepted the purpose and need as well of that same project. So we would have had to go in previously, review the purpose and need, and say accepted on there. And then when we were proposed a class of action, we would go back in. At that point, you got to realize for anything that's higher than a type 1, it would have gone through the EPDM process. So it would have gone out to all the agencies, would have gone to the public. You would have had all their comments, all their feedback. You would have seen what the issues were. Also ahead of time, before a project goes out for review through that process, the project delivery coordinators have an opportunity to review the purpose and need and review what we call preliminary environmental discussions, which is our way per resource issue to say, based on where we think the project's going to be, here's what we know about, and then tell us what to do with it. So there's lots of opportunities between this office and the district to see all the details about the project throughout.
For CE1 or something that's proposed to CE1, that does not go to OEM.
CE1s do not go to OEM, but we'll show you, we've got a lot of internal controls where they've got to identify the specific C or D list that it goes to. We've got the controls if it's these other items as well. We're pulling project descriptions from the work program database so that they're putting in an FM and it's pulling out whatever's in the bank account. And then you'll see enhancements to the form that are significantly different than what you saw last year. What you saw last year was 12 questions, all yes or no, with a requirement to either add an attachment or provide some analysis. Over the last year since then, we've instituted a new form that's questions-based that literally goes through all the things that people need to think about to make this consideration. And you have to make some statements and you have to provide documentation. And if one of your statements pushes you to a higher level class of action, it stops you, tells you to go work on it.
And also there's some checkpoints if you get to a certain potential level of impact where you would have to consult back with us and then kind of work through that issue and see if you can stay within the type 1 or not.
Yep, you're exactly right.
So if it doesn't trip the triggers, the class of action for CE1 stays at the district level.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions? We've got a little bit more, then we're going to take a quick break and release half the folks here. Don't need to be here, but I'm going to hand it over to Victor, who's going to go through a few slides for us.
This is Gloria Hardeman-Tobin. I have a question. I think I was talking to myself on mute.
Oh, sorry, Gloria.
That's okay. I'm the Assistant Chief Counsel. for the South with Federal Highway, and I just have a general question, and maybe you can answer it and maybe you can't. But last year when we were conducting the audit, one of the things that came up is that you do have attorneys in your district offices, and I know one of the presenters noted that, you know, you only send things to legal, which is, you know, that's Kathleen Tulin's shop, for things that are required and or things that they want to look at or things that you consider might be a bit unusual. But can you just generally touch on the role that the attorneys play in your district office with regard to the EDTM or any of your review process?
Well, like Katasha's going to answer.
I can just say, in general, our district attorneys are invited to the monthly coordination meetings that we have with the districts, and also our central office OGC staff are invited to those meetings as well. It's kind of the district's purview, the involvement that they might need on a particular issue with the district OGC, and then also because I believe, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that they're all one office.
They are. They all work. They all work for central office.
Yeah. But so like Kathleen Tulin and Nona and George, who are kind of assigned to our shop, coordinate on a regular basis back with the district's attorneys as well when there's issues going on that they're dealing with on the district level. So
So one thing I was going to add that you kind of hit on that nobody had talked about, just was the idea that we're in constant communication with the districts. There are monthly coordinations with every district, of which our OGC central office is a part of and the district OGC staff is a part of. And at those meetings, they talk about all the projects that are coming up, what they see, what the issues are. They describe what's happening with the projects, and then collectively they determine what level of engagement they need based on, I guess, the risk or the issues that they identified at those meetings.
As the individual 4F always goes to.
Oh, yeah, Margie's right. Anything, obviously, the individual 4F always funnels through that.
Yeah, yes.
Anything else, Gloria? Did that answer it for you?
I think so. So generally speaking, they are maybe like the first line of review for the Office of General Counsel, so they can grant legal sufficiency and or approve the Section 4F.
I know the district are part of the development initially, and then the official review and approval for the individual 4F falls through Kathleen Tulin and her staff shop.
Okay,
the district
I think
is on the front line in the development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else from anybody? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Victor.
Okay, thanks, Pete. I'm going to talk a little bit on some of the issues which Margie and Katasha pretty much have covered. So the first one is reevaluation, and we pretty much follow 23 CFR 771, Section 129. So this right here showed a process which we follow and is documented in Part 1, Chapter 13 of our PD&E manual, that the district will initiate a reevaluation, and then they have to consult with our office, either through project-specific meetings or those monthly coordination meetings that Katasha and Peter talk about. Then through that consultation, we ask if the signature is required. If not, we can document that in the project file. So there will be an action that within this date, the district has consulted with OEM, and it has determined that no signature for that reevaluation is required. If the signature is required, the district will continue preparing reevaluation and submit to here for review. And the review process is pretty much the same as what Katasha has described. So Katasha's process applies to reevaluation, Type 2 CEs, EA FONSI, draft EAS, et cetera. And then after that, if through the reviews it is cleared, then Jason, who is our director, signs it, and then the district can proceed with the project. So if you look at 23 CFR 771, it has 3 parts. 129, it has 3 parts. The first 2 parts, A and B, concentrate on EAS, to reevaluate EAS, whether it's a draft EAS or final EAS, to determine if supplemental EIS is required or not. So that process also is documented within our chapter. And then 129C covers approval of record of decision, FONSI, or Type 2 CEs. When the project moves to the next phase, be it final design, if there's a time lapse, or right-of-way phase or construction, we require the district to reevaluate. So that's when the district would initiate reevaluation, apart from reevaluating draft EIS, if it has proceeded to final EIS within 3 years of final to road or final to final design, as the regulation requires. So project commitment, again, this was covered a little bit by Margie. We have the procedure, which we are using it to track project commitments. And the commitment starts from the PD&E phase, although sometimes the planning can come up with the commitments. We don't recommend commitment to be done in the planning phase because the nature of the scope of that project is probably a lot of variables, so can vary. So most of the commitment starts with a PD&E phase. They are documented within the project commitment record form. So it's a form. You folks are familiar with that. The procedure, a document the process, and then the PD&E manual part 2, chapter 22, gives the guidance on how to complete those commitments. So this slide here shows a couple bullets which we emphasize in that chapter, that commitments need to be concise and clear, which means that they need to be written and documented correctly. They should not repeat laws, specifications, or standards. By law and statute, we are required, and further statute, we are required to follow the law, follow the specifications, standard specification for roadway construction, as well as following the standards. So if you have a commitment and you say your commitment to either follow the specification or to restate that specification of the commitment, we discourage that. And in relation to that, we want to make sure that commitments are doable, not just putting something which cannot be doable. We emphasize whoever is writing that commitment, who is the project manager for that PD&E project, they need to work with other discipline officers to make sure that if you are committing to build a certain bridge, yes, can that bridge be constructed? Or you are committing to avoid an impact to a certain resources, would that road be constructed that way? So you have to work with other officers, not just confine yourself within environmental office. The other important thing that we emphasize as a guide is recognize the difference between permit conditions and commitments. Some of the commitments may be put in PD&E and then later on they become permit conditions. So when that project is being reevaluated, we change the status of those commitments as completed because they become part of permit conditions. And the most important thing is to state who is responsible to making those commitments being done. For the evaluations, what we do is to provide the status of environmental commitments in environmental evaluation form. Quality control, quality assurance, specific to project. Katasha has gone through a lot of information related to the whole quality control process at the department, the district, as well as here, Office of Environmental Management. But we require the consultant to conduct quality control for their projects because they are responsible for developing the projects for the districts. We pay the consultant to conduct quality control for their projects. We require them to develop a quality control plan and follow it, implement and follow it. So that is part of the scope of the project. It's part of the negotiation on the fees. The districts, when they receive deliverables from the consultants, they are required to review. That's what Katasha was talking about, the district conducting a project review, and then verify that a quality control was performed. And then here, our role is basically performing quality assurance. We've got a lot of guidance across the board, which help us to do project quality control and quality assurance. Some of them are listed here, quality assurance, quality control policy, which is our department-wide policy. We're required to perform quality control and quality assurance for all of our projects as well as our programs. FDOT Project Management Handbook, Part 1, Chapter 16, specifically talks about how to develop and implement quality control. As I said, area scope of services for PD&E studies emphasize the need or require that the consultant need to develop a quality control plan and implement it on the project. And also, we recently, I believe, end of last year, we developed quality control plan and quality control checklist to enable the consultant follow the quality control plan. So consistent district-wide as well as statewide, if they follow those checklists, pretty much we should be consistent on that. So the quality control checklists, they're new, that should be start to be implemented in new projects. Okay, so the last thing which I'm going to be talking about is training. OEM training program. We've got a very extensive training program in this office. Specifically, we've got a lot of training opportunities related to PD&E process and documentation. And the PD&E process and documentation, you're talking about Part 1 chapters as well as Part 2 chapters, as Mark talked about. We've got training related to ETDM processing, as well as the NEPA assignment. SWEPT, we've got a lot of SWEPT. When Pete rolled out SWEPT almost 2 years ago, he did extensive training and he continues to do training. I believe even, this is part of that. Later on, it's part of that training. He's going to be doing another one, I believe, tomorrow. Is that tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Yeah. For the
one yesterday afternoon.
Yep. So, I mean, there's a lot of training which are going on. So in addition to that, we have subject-specific classes or courses, a lot of them being environmental-specific, engineering-specific, or other general classes. We've got a lot of those which we are doing across the board. On the left is our office website, which shows the training. You'll see we've got a lot of tracks. We are building those tracks on the go. We are recording some of the webinars. This is one of that. It's going to be recorded. Some of the classes are instructor-led courses. We go train the district staff as well as the consultants. So we're opening to both. Talked about webinar. Also, we're developing web-based or CBTs. All of these are available. If you go click on those links, some of the link will take you to a webinar. Some of the link will take you to CBTs, and some of them will be on-demand videos, which we produce on the go. The new thing which we're going to be starting to do this year, pretty much is going to be every year, is Transportation Symposium. The folks here in Florida, they are aware of Design Conference, and then it changed its name to be Design Expo. And then this year, we are unveiling a new Florida Transportation Symposium, which is FTS. So I want to highlight about FTS because it's going to be something different compared to what we used to have as Design Expo, Design Conference. With this one here, it's going to be a broad transportation expo or symposium, as they say. It covers not only design, it's going to cover environmental, PD&Es, it's going to cover planning and other classes. So with related to PD&E, we were given half a track, which is a day worth of classes. So we've got at least 7 classes, which are specific for PD&E. Tuesday is going to cover all the classes, and Tuesday is a prime time. So we expect that we're gonna train about 500 or more people, and these are consultants, district staff, central office staff, local government, and other stakeholders. Whoever can afford to come, they will come and be trained. As of last week, I was told that the registration is about 1,500. They expect 1,000 more. So we expect to have a lot of people being trained. So this one is going to be huge. A lot of impact to our NEPA Assignment. Is going to be one of the class, PD&E for beginners, commitments, cultural resources, and every year we're going to be coming with different classes. So all the classes which we offer to our staff are tracked in our new learning management system, which is called our Learning Curve. Every DOT staff is required to develop individual training plan, work with their supervisors, agree on the classes which they need to take for that particular year. We've already filled our next year's training plan. So all the next year training, individual training plan have been completed last month. Some of the trainings people are selected related to this office is offering. So we not only offer training to environmental folks, we offer training to other offices too. At the same time, also people from our office or district environmental offices can be taking classes from other offices. All right, I believe this is what I was planning to say.
Okay, is there any questions on any of that? No? Okay, so this was one of the spots where we were intended to take a break. I think everybody in the room and out there on the call has now had a huge data dump. So at this point, let's see what time is it. It is 2:07. Let's take a 10-minute break, or actually make it 15 in case people have to use the facility. Let's be back here by 2:25. And at 2:25, we'll get going again, and we'll get to show you the eye candy, which is SWEP, the Statewide Environmental Project Tracker. Now that you've heard about the processes and you've seen, you know, the intent on how things flow through, now we'll bring you up to speed on the application itself and how it facilitates all that. So we're going to pause right now. We're going to put you guys on mute, and we'll be back on at 2:25. Thanks, everybody. Throughout the district, so our project development engineers, our project managers that are handling the day-to-day operation, their team members. Their team members could be local staff that's working on it. It could also be their consultant community that's been hired to provide services to the department. Within the Office of Environmental Management, we've got our project delivery coordinators and our managers. We also have subject matter experts, people that are, you know, experts in 106 or 4F here on staff, or our bugs and bunny folks, whatever the case may be. We've got our quality assurance and quality control staff, as well as our attorneys fully integrated into the system as well as projects that they have interest in or are required to be a part of the process. All of these things are kind of managed through these electronic notifications and prompts to encourage some interaction. And then, of course, you guys, the audit team as well, being able to consolidate all of those various things all into one interface. With that, I'm going to pause because Eric wanted to talk about some coordination relative to this piece, and I kind of jumped on without letting him have his 60 seconds first. So I'm gonna stop for 1 minute, Eric, and let you just pause on some of the coordination items that you wanted to talk about, and then I'll jump right back into this.
Yeah, I'll just be real brief. As you all know from last year, and then for those of you who weren't with us last year, we do a whole lot of behind-the-scenes coordination for the Federal Highway Administration audit. So, of course, we're going to do that again this year. As soon as we get the specific audit schedule from Joe, as we approach that time period, we kind of fill in the blanks. Our coordination efforts are statewide, so we basically work with all of the districts where you're going to be right down to booking rooms and making sure that everything is ready so when the audit team comes on site, you all don't have any difficulties in doing the pieces that you're doing. And then, of course, when you are on site, this office is available to support that entire effort. So I just wanted to throw that in because we're in the process of beginning to plan for that. And last year, and I'm sure again this year, I'll be working hand in cuff with Joe and trying to get some specifics together. Obviously, the general audit schedule is a stickler for that so that we can have an idea of when you all are going to come in, and what do we have to do in advance to prepare for that?
Great. Thanks, Eric. So after talking about within SWEP, the folks that are kind of integrated into that particular process, there's also other folks that aren't necessarily listed that are also a part of it. We've got the Title VI coordinator that is a part of it, who has the ability to actively review things. When they do their annual report, they, just like you guys, are going to access the system and see what the approvals are within a particular year. That Title VI coordinator has that opportunity to access SWEP as well to do their annual report. They're also copied on projects as they move throughout the process. So before it's ever approved in the first place, they have that review opportunity. Also, our local agency program administrators as well as staff out there are also on here as well. So there's even folks probably beyond that as well I don't have named on here, but the idea is a single stop. Let's get everybody looking at the same information and kind of reuse throughout these other processes. Within SWEP, this is at sort of the macro level. We break things up into components and how we logically organize things. We have project dashboards, which help us with project milestones to know what's coming, what's going to be completed, how long it's taking. We've got tools in place that allow our districts and their consultants and staff to create the various forms within the system, whether that's developing a type 1, whether that's doing an environmental document submittal. And you've heard Katasha talk about an environmental document submittal, and you'll see that before. But that's sort of what we consider our routing sheet. You know how like you used to hand a routing sheet, like say you had paper and they had a new contract that needed to be signed. And before it ultimately got signed by the authority who can sign it, right? You got this routing sheet that you can, that person in that authoritative position can say, it went through these 7 layers before it got to me, and they reviewed it on this date with this signature. And before it ever got to that person, here's the list of all the people that looked at it and when they signed off on it. Our environmental document submittal is that. It's an electronic version of that. It's intended to document all the various steps that it went through, who saw what, when did they see it, what was the outcome of what they did, so that you can provide that next level beyond you some assurances that the level below it did their part of the process. And so part of the project setup is for folks to be able to do that. Then you've got this whole section that's project documents, and that's where you access the project file. That's where you see the approved document, all the supporting technical studies, any concurrence letters, correspondence, all of those various things. So people used to keep them in their own electronic folders, or they used to keep them in paper in their desks or in their file folders. Now it all has to go in here. And thank goodness, one of the things that came out within SWEP as well was when we did the latest PD&E manual update in June of 2017, we added a new chapter in Part 1, Chapter 15, that talks about what the project file is and what the records retention and management schedule is for files. And the reason why that's important is because it tells you that that all has to go in here. This is the project file. So that's the procedural direction provided to the department that recognize this system as the holding pond for all these elements. The last two pieces on here, the quality and performance management, not only do we have some requirements within the MOU itself, that one of the things that we need to manage is, one, we need to track some of our performance for how we're performing against things, but within those performance measures themselves, which we've mapped internally to how we report back on each and every one of those. But one of those elements is timeliness. Are we going faster under NEPA assignment with FDOT as the lead versus when FHWA was the lead? And again, by having everything within SWEP, we know when every action on every file happens throughout the entire process. So we know when it started, we know when it was approved, and therefore we know the difference in how long that took. So the quality and performance section has a bunch of reports and allows us to kind of interactively monitor and manage the program in real time. The team management part is a piece that probably has less functionality than what was originally intended just because of the way the process kind of morphed. But it's a piece that is available to the OEM management staff here that allows them to physically assign some subject matter experts onto a particular project. It's not that these subject matter experts are not on the project. It's that within our process itself, we pretty much integrated everybody on every project. So the idea is when it goes into ERC and they do the review, everybody looks at it. When it comes up and it's ready to go through the approval, everybody looks at it. And so initially it was thought that you might kind of one-off some folks. And so the system was built to kind of allow that one-off, this one expert on this one project. But the reality is in a year and a half, we pretty much apply all resources pretty consistently. So that's that piece. When we're looking at the site itself, it should be pretty simple. And one of the things I talked about was that idea that things are roles-based. So depending on who you are, the menu and the buttons change or don't change or accessible or not accessible, kind of based on who you are. These menus on the left allow you to, what it's hard to see is these are little down arrows, and underneath there's all sorts of various things. And depending on who you are within the process, you see or have access to those various things. If you're someone, I know early on, Katasha had mentioned on that one report, she said, don't get caught up in the word project editor. Okay, project editor is a term we use within the SWEPT application, and that's a role that is assigned from someone in a leadership position. So first off, accounts get assigned by the district environmental management office leadership. Okay, they are the prong down there. They've got their environmental manager, their project development manager. That's kind of the leadership string, and then they have administrator above them. Between those three, they identify who has access to SWEPT within their district, and if they have access, what types of functions can they perform. So when someone, whether it's internal staff or one of their consultants, is assigned as a project editor, the district environmental leadership has identified this person to have these rights within their district. So a project editor is what we term for how someone can actually begin drafting a project. They can begin drafting a type 1. They can begin drafting a type 2. They're not approving anything because that's not what project editors do. Project editors' job is to draft things and then move it along the QA/QC process, perhaps up to a project manager, the project manager then funneling it up to leadership, whatever the case may be. But based on what their roles are, that's what determines what they can do and what the word project editor means.
Also gives the approval capability.
Yeah, so there's other roles. So if you are a district environmental manager, that is a role. So there's 7 or 8 of them throughout the entire state. They all have a specific geographic region, a portion of the state that's tied to their district boundaries, and they're the person that has that role that can perform that function. Like for instance, before anything actually comes up to OEM, it's got to go through their editors. It's got to be reviewed by the project manager. The project manager has to push it up to their environmental leadership, and it has to be certified ready by their environmental manager and their project development manager. The two-legged stool out of the 3 on the leaders on every single thing that ever comes up to OEM. Those 2 in that leadership position have to certify it's ready to move on in the process. They do it electronically. We'll show you within the system, we've got approval history at the bottom of every project, and you can see very quickly and accurately who it went to on what date and what they did on the project as well. So you'll see this is an interactive site. It should be laid out fairly intuitively. There's some buttons on here. There's a toggle menu up here, this hamburger thing in the left. That allows this whole blue area to kind of disappear and come back. So if you were reading something that, was kind of text heavy and you wanted more real estate, you just press this little toggle menu and you can look at everything. There's help under here, and if you clicked on the button, you'd see that there's tips and videos. We do a lot of short little videos that we record that show you how to use a particular function. And we don't expect everybody to watch every single video, but they're there when you need it. So, you know, when someone has a particular function that they're responsible for, but maybe the training was today and I'm going to do the work in 3 months from now, you know, I want a kind of refresher. And so we kind of build those things to be refreshers. We also have the various account settings, which is when you log in, there'll be a picture of your head, you know, and shoulders. The head and shoulders icon is like how you change your password, how you see information about yourself. There's what we used to call a golden search, which is you don't need to know how to find anything. You just need to be able to type in a word, and that'll take care of itself. So if you think about, I hope, Joe, you probably do. You probably know FM numbers, but if you do, that's sad, but if you do, you could type in the FM number in the search and you could quickly get there. If you didn't know the FM number of a project, but you knew the project name, you could put it in there. If you could, whatever word helps you find things, you can type it in there and get to it. And then it will show those various results. Within the application itself, once you've done the search, we organize your projects. There's every time you see one of these boxes at the very top, that's a sorter. So you can, if this, you know, had a ton of projects on here and you wanted to start typing the name, it would quickly reduce your list down to the one that sort of makes sense for you. If you want to look by a particular district, if Mr. Crazy Joe knows an FM number, you can start typing that, and it helps you get there. The other thing, and Mike will show this in a few minutes, at the bottom of every single page, so it doesn't matter where you are in the application, because this is the footer on every single page, how to get a hold of us, right? So there's an email address on here, which I would encourage anyone to use at any time. It is a help desk related email. It goes to about 15 people. I'm one of the managers. There's another technical lead manager. Mike's on there as well. And between us, we all see every one of those emails, and we know who's going to be working on it. We also know whether anybody's been sitting for a few minutes and needs some help. And I can tell you I'll absolutely jump on. Because here's what I understand, and I'm going to make sure I say this. We want you to contact us before you get frustrated. By the time you send us an email or pick up the phone, don't already be frustrated. We don't want you to be frustrated. If you can't find something, let us know. We'll help you get there quick. But if you, oh, I can figure this out, oh, I can figure this out, and then eventually you're frustrated, then you call like, man, you know, you're wasting time off your own life. We don't want you to be frustrated. We're happy to help you. A little bit on the dashboards for how things are organized. We've got the federal, we've got the state, we've got things that we report upstairs on these various timelines and how things are taking and how it's integrated within the system itself. The project input, we'll show you a couple of those, but it's broken out based on what are you trying to accomplish? What do you have the rights to do? Am I going to build a type 1 checklist? Am I going to go build a new scope of service? Am I going to set up an original PD&E project that I'm going to do a reevaluation on? You know, what am I ultimately going to do? Within the project documents, you know, it provides the structure, it's a consistent format. Every file that goes in there, we're handling the naming convention, we're handling the document retention, we're organizing it in a way that it can be actively managed. If and when there happens to be litigation, let there never be any, that's all I know. But if there is, there's a tool within the system that allows the district's leadership as well as the Office of General Counsel leadership to look at the various files and collectively create what they consider to submit as their administrative record and to certify that. And then, of course, all the supporting information for the document environmental review are in there as well. This is just a quick picture of the environmental document submittal. Remember what I said that was? It's that electronic routing sheet as it moves along. So you're talking about, you know, what are you trying to submit? Is it a reevaluation? If the answer is yes, what type? What phase is it in? Is this a local agency program project, yes or no? If the answer is yes, you got to do some of these things. And some of this stuff changes based on what your answers are to the questions above with various things. Also within the site itself, we basically call them ticklers, but really the idea is what's my list of things I need to work on. So there's a section under here that's called projects needing approval, and you can click on district signatures and see everything that's in the district process that they need to work on to know what needs to move up. We have the OEM project delivery coordinators. That's where they go for their list, where they're supposed to be doing their completeness check and do their assurances before things move on. If they do push the button and move things on, there's a list for our environmental process administrators. They can click on that and they can have their customized list throughout the process. If they push it on, perhaps there's Office of General Counsel review. If there's an Office of General Counsel review, they'll have their own list. They'll act on it as well. And then ultimately things would end up with the Office of Environmental Management Director. Again, he clicks on this. This is his to-do list of all those things. He can click on every one of these projects. You can go get all the detailed information, see all the reports, read the approval history, all of those various elements.
If something's ready for a signature,
yep,
and it goes in there,
yep,
will you get an email saying there's something, a document in there for you to go in?
Yes, so that was a good question, Derek. So the answer is absolutely. So we do it kind of three ways. We put it by acting and completing your part of the approval and pushing it on, that moves it to this report. Okay, so it's there. Everyone in the process receives an email, and in that email, it starts right out with who's the next point in the process, who has the action, and where are we. So the two is the person with the action, the CCs is everybody within the process so that they know, and in the main part of the email itself, it'll say action by, the environmental process administrators. This submittal has been confirmed by the project delivery coordinators and is now ready for your review and approval within SWEPT, and we provide them the details about the project and then a direct link. They can click on the link. It comes zoomed into that project so they can begin doing their review and then act on it or respond, whichever way they need to respond. So that's two ways, and every time an action happens, there's emails that notify everybody. The other third way that keeps everybody involved is, if you can kind of see up on the screen, you might be a little far and not be able to see, but directly next to this head and shoulders icon, there's like a bell, and that bell is what we call alerts. So based on who you are and what your roles and responsibilities are within the system, you'll have various alerts. So if there was something that was in my queue that I haven't actually acted on yet, there'll be, say there's one thing, there'll be that red bell there, or there'll be a bell there, and there'll be a red circled number 1. And you can click on it, and it would tell you, hey, you've got this project that needs your review, and then you could actually click on respond in that alert, and again, it would take you right there focused on that unique project. So 3 ways to kind of act on it, and eventually when they do act on it, again, everybody receives a notification that's moving along in the process, and the emails update based on who they're with. So for instance, kind of the way the review works, when something's sent simultaneously to Katasha and to Margie, they get it both simultaneously, but it can't move on to Jason until both of them sign. If one of them signs, the other one's notified that the other one signed, but it says, hey, this still won't move on to Jason, so we have both signatures. It doesn't care which one's first and which one's second, but it's looking for the presence or absence of both signatures to kind of move it on.
If you do get something for action,
yep,
you fail to sign it within a certain amount of days,
yeah,
you get a follow-up notification.
So we don't, yes, the answer is you will be notified throughout, and we do have performance reports that kind of count down what you have left on various things, and if the date has passed, it will go negative, and that shows up on our performance reports internally, because we want to know, is this a person problem, is it a project problem, where in the process are we potentially having a bottleneck? for things, and then based on kind of having those details, that helps us figure out what the appropriate approach to that particular issue is. I'm going to look, because I thought I saw some questions come in. So I'm kind of looking at everybody in the room, but I want to be able to see what the questions are. Will our swept access have all these features? So you'll have the majority of features. You'll have the features tied to your review. You'll see it's slimmed down quite a bit. Looking at the changes you made and to the guidance and the staff, have you seen improvement in this year in the district folks entering all the files in the system? What was the noticeable area in need of improvement last year? I probably can't speak to the last one being the IT guy, but I can tell you, like, I'm not sure. The one thing I can actually tell you related to things is that the projects themselves are all unique. And the documentation requirements for each project can be unique based on what it's encountering and what it needs and what you expect to see in the file. What we have done significantly is within at least the interactive forms that are leading and supporting a decision, we put a lot more controls in place that don't let you move on to the next step unless all of the various things are in the file, the question has been answered, and it's required. I also think that in the last year and a half, if you think about, you guys were here doing the audit, we had been in this system for basically 5.5 months. Anybody that's done any NEPA projects, nothing's done in 5.5 months. Every single one of the projects, every single one of the approvals had a long life before then, which means it was in all these various other systems. It means it was in, you know, some other state. And I think one of the biggest changes that you'll see is the idea that I think everybody understands that SWEP is the file, and there has been a concerted effort to make sure in all the coordination meetings and all the approvals and everything else that all the files are uploaded and accessible within SWEP.
So there are internal controls in your system.
Yeah.
I'm doing a reevaluation for construction, and I didn't do a reevaluation for design right away. A bell would go off, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I don't know that would be one of the. Okay. But there are controls in place. I don't know that we have a requirement in place that can't move to construction add reeval unless I had documented the previous reevals. And part of it has to do with the idea that, remember what I was talking about, these projects have been around for a long time. We've been doing this for 1.5 years, and just because I don't have an entry in the database to know that prior reevals, like, they weren't uploaded within SWEP, so I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, probably in 5 years, I'll be able to tell you all those things, but I wouldn't be able to tell you that yet. Yeah. Let's see, another question. That sounds fair and optimistic. The idea of internal. Yes, absolutely. The idea is to have internal controls and then have the people and these multi-levels of QA, QC be the compensating controls for those internal controls as well. Okay. I mean, my
PIP is probably one of the bigger ones we've added. So they can't advance the document to final approval without having a PIP in the file. Public involvement plan.
Which is early on. Yeah. I mean, that's when you're kicking off the project. So, yeah. So it does. It looks in the project file, and kind of this goes back to what he was saying before. So you've got something that requires an approval, and then you have some expectations of what should be in the project file. And it won't let you move on to the approval until it says that these things are present, in fact, in the project file. And it'll tell you what's missing and how you need to go fix it as well. And the last thing on there is just access to the standard reports. This is pretty much the report we give to FHWA every quarter on what are the approvals that happened within a specific timeline. with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. We're going to do a SWEP demo for you guys. And feel free to keep asking questions. We want you guys to understand. So I'm happy to take whatever time. Make sure you guys know.
From a state, another state agency or federal agency, would they be allowed to go in there and just view documents?
It's a closed system right now. The only people that are provided access have to be given access through the district environmental managers. For what type of access do they need? Yeah.
But it's possible for like a state Fish and Wildlife, if they wanted access to SWEP, they could get it to look at things, or no?
To tie into that, in ETM we had cooperating agencies and participating agencies. Could they be assigned rights within SWEP and get the project files or something?
So the reality is I could do anything, but we haven't identified. I mean, there's nothing technically that would prevent that from happening, because right now today it's based on a role that defines what your level of access is, but we haven't discussed that.
Like the surety of that thing. Could do anything.
Well, that is the reality. The reality is I'm not going to stand here and tell you we can't do something because, I want technology to do. We can do anything. Time and budget, I'll figure it out. Let me turn it over to Mike. I'm like, why am I still looking at my screen? There you go, Mike.
Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate a lot of the features that Pete just touched on, so we'll kind of fly through quite a bit of it, but I am going to be using our testing and training server, so you may see some real project data, but it's all for testing and training purposes, so don't read too much into any actual project information that you see. I'm going to log in as a district environmental manager, and on the login screen you can see there is a forgot your password function, so if you do forget your password, you can use that, type in your email address, and get a prompt to reset it. And you can also find our contact information there as well. So this is the landing page for SWEP, for District Environmental Manager. In the top left, this is our breadcrumb trail. So as you navigate through the site, you'll see that breadcrumb trail change to kind of orient you where you are within the site. You can click those links to navigate back, for example, to the home page. Pete mentioned the hamburger menu icon to toggle the left navigation menu. The OEM and SWEP icons will also take you back to this landing page. And then you've got your various navigation menus, those you can expand. So here's where they can go in and start a new scope of services, set up a project, for example, for an EA or EIS, fill out a Type 1 form. We've got two versions of the Type 2 form because we are working on a new version. The reeval form. Districts can also complete non-major state action checklists within SWEP. And along with those state environmental certifications, they can complete public hearing certification forms, as well as the federal environmental certification form. And each of these menus kind of corresponds to one of the modules, and you can see what's available, dashboards, reports, and then our help menu. You'll be able to go there to get an overview of how to navigate the site. We have quick guides, which are PDFs suitable for printing that describe various processes within SWEP. We have training videos. So as we record and produce more videos about various features of SWEP, those end up here on the training videos page. We've got SWEP contacts. These are all our, from the central office to the districts, all the emails and phone numbers of the individuals to contact. And again, this is testing and training, so some of the names have changed in reality. And then we've also added a What's New page where we can send out announcements of what's new and inform our users about new features and functions within the site. Going to the upper right, the profile icon, this is where you can change your password, update your contact information, and log out. We also have a delegate authority link for certain roles, like the district environmental manager, where for a limited time they can delegate their authority to another individual within their district. It has to be an actual district user, not a consultant, but they could choose a individual in their district and then a date range, so for up to a maximum of 1 year, but generally this is going to be, you know, I'm going to be on vacation next month for a week, and I want to give this person the authority to approve documents on my behalf while I'm gone. So they would go ahead and do that. Put in a comment, and then save. And then you can see these are the active delegations, and then the expired. They can edit the active delegations, change the date, or expire it if needed.
And again, logging on as tester number 3, that gives you the rights and authorities to do certain things.
Yes, correct. So the data entry folks don't have anything to delegate. The admins, the help desk, can actually delegate on behalf of any user, and that would generally come in the form of, I can't get to my computer, there was an emergency, I'm in the hospital, the help desk activates this delegation for me, and we do that on their behalf. You can see the alerts that Pete was mentioning, and the red and the white number is for new alerts that you haven't seen. As soon as you open the alerts and look at them, that red number will actually drop off, and I'll show you that in a moment. The next icon is a new feature we're working on called My Inbox, and that is just going to be all the notifications that were sent to you from SWEPT, and you'll be able to view those within SWEPT for them. So if you've deleted them from your actual email system, SWEPT still has a copy. You can always get back to those. And then we have our search function, and I was just on vacation at Pensacola Beach, so I'll pick my favorite project. So we've got a listing of projects that match the search term, documents, and then you can actually also search for people. You could filter down based on district or these various categories, and then you can open the project page. I'm using a technique where you're probably familiar. You can control-click a link, which will open it in a new tab. That way you don't lose where you were. You can't open it in the same tab and use the back button, but I generally am a tab guy, so I like to bounce back and forth. So here's the project page for this project. Some of the details are real, you know, the FM number, if it had an FAP number assigned, the group identifiers, these are coming out of the work program, the district, the county, the project description, this is obviously just made up text, but the district has the ability to edit that right within the system. Something new you may see that we've added recently, this probably wouldn't happen in a project description, but in all our rich text boxes, they can now insert both images as well as tables. So you'll start to see in some of the newer documents, those have been added to various descriptions. The work mix activity type, again, from work program. Every night we get a data dump from work program, what they call their super file. We pull that information in, and if we find an update, we go ahead and update it in SWEPT. So the project name is going to match what's in the work program, the group identifiers, FAP, and work mix, and so on. Class of action is what they assign when they set the project up. They have the ability to link this back to ETDM numbers. We are going to be beefing that up a little bit to go ahead and, if they put the FM number in ETDM, go ahead and link to the project in SWEPT and vice versa. So that's going to be a future enhancement.
I know this is taking a half step back. Is there a standard
question we give them is enter a brief 1 to 2 paragraph description of the project. So I think the key word there is brief. Not all of them follow that, but anything beyond that, I think is up to the district how they want to use that. Local agency program, this is where they have the ability to say if it's a LAP project or not, who the LAP agency is. They just start typing the name, let's say Leon County, and then whether or not that agency is already PD&E LAP certified or will need to be PD&E LAP certified via the LAP coordinator. Once they do that, if there are LAP coordinators in the district, they now appear in the contact information section. So we've got the district team, the manager, whoever the editors are. We don't list the district environmental manager and project development manager on every page. They're just understood to be part of the team. The OEM reviewers, these get automatically assigned when the project is set up based on their regional assignments. So that's the PDC, the backup, the engineering lead. And then they have the ability to, when they're setting it up, if they answer that there's an individual 4F on this project, OGC will automatically be assigned. OEM also has the ability to assign OGC if needed, and then also on an EIS, OGC would automatically be assigned. Project contact details gives more information, mailing address, and so forth for all these individuals. And then project notification details, this is similar to the My Inbox concept, except it's all notifications for the project, not just those sent to me. There's a project map, and it's interactive, so you can zoom in, try to find where you stayed on vacation, in this case. And then beneath that, we've got the schedule data. This is also, I'm going to actually collapse the menu and just zoom in a little bit. So the site is designed to be responsive. So, you know, if you've got a smaller screen, it should lay itself out to fit on your screen as best as it can. I've used it on my phone. You can use it on a tablet.
I'm using it on my phone right now as we talk.
It's cross-browser. So for those of you who are familiar with the EST, which was developed back in 2005, before browsers had tabs, this site is much more modern and easy to navigate. And we actually are going to be porting a lot of these features over to the EST in the future. So the project schedule data comes again from a nightly export. It's called the PSM database, Project Scheduling and Management, and this is where the districts put in their project schedules and milestones. As these milestones are met, they're so-called actualized. They get an A, meaning the date has occurred and that milestone has been met, has occurred on that date. Future ones, and I've picked one that doesn't have anything in the future, but if there was a future date, it would just appear with a white background if it's in the future. Any date that is behind by less than 2 weeks would have a yellow background, and more than 2 weeks behind has a kind of a rose background. And I believe the dates that are not in the schedule database, they say an early start, an early finish, a late start, late finish. So they have some float built in. These dates are always going to be the finish date, and if the date has been actualized, we show the actual finish. If it has not, we show the early finish date, and it would appear in italics without the A. So that's how you'll know. So that's the project schedule, and then beneath that we have our project documents listing. So for the districts, they have a lot of buttons that you may not see on your that you won't see on your version of the site. This allows them to actually upload. So let's say they had a scope of service they previously done for this project. They can click the upload button, say they have a scope of service, navigate to the file, and do I have test file? Let's see. Navigate to their file. You can see it picks up the file name and date from the file, but they can actually rename it. And it's interactively showing you underneath what the standardized naming convention that will be applied to that file, which is the FM number, the COA, the district, the user-generated portion of the name that I typed in, and then the publication date.
Before you move on, stay there for a second. So part of that is, just so you guys know up there, the standard naming convention, so that's applied to every single file that goes in. It's also the file that gets pulled into other systems within the department. We have lots of other applications. These files get stored in our electronic document management system. The electronic document management system is connected to other applications like Project Suite, Enterprise Edition, and other systems like that, where it could pull the files from by FM out of EBMS and pull in those standard files. Part of what we try to do within those standard naming conventions is that before you even open the file, you know what class of action it is, you know what district it is, you know some details about it, so you don't have to open up every single individual file to figure out what the context is for the file you're about to open. And we're handling that for folks. So.
Got a question. I don't
Yeah.
know if it happens, but if I'm another agency like Jacksonville Transportation Authority or Miami-Dade Expressway or City of Orlando, and I'm doing the NEPA document rather than the department, would it still go in SWIFT?
Yeah, I mean, if you're part of the local,
But the department's not doing the document. Say another agency is doing the document, and then you're overlooking it. So would it still go in SWIFT?
so the way to talk to you is if they're part of the local agency program and we have oversight, then it's our district and our director that's signing it. If it's a document that is outside of that and that local entity is doing it not through the local agency program and does not require oversight by the department, then no, they're following whatever process they're following. But if they're part of the local agency program and they are doing the majority of the work, and a lot of it depends on the district. Most of our FDOT districts are more likely to take on the environmental process for that local entity right from start because they want to make sure it's 100% right. So I think that the use case you're identifying is kind of rare. But if in fact there was an entity that was capable of producing the document that's not through the local agency program, not using federal dollars, their job is to fulfill all the same requirements themselves, and it's their job to do it with their due diligence. But if it was going to come through and require
required on it, and they were doing it,
absolutely
go through SWIFT.
Absolutely in here. Yeah, anything that requires our signature, if it's a type 1 or all the way to an EIS, it goes through here.
So we ask a short series of questions to help us kind of attribute the file. So is it an attorney work product? Typically that's a no. Is it part of the administrative record? Typically that's a yes. If they say it's an attorney work product, then we know that it's not part of the admin record and will be exempt. Otherwise, they can answer those questions themselves, but we default to the typical answer. And does this file contain information that supports other topics? That allows them to place the same file within the different folders. So if they had a file that goes in more than one category, they're able to do that here. So that uploads the file, and then the file is in the project documents listing. They can modify those attributes. If the file is not attached to, let's say, a type 2 or a reeval that's been approved, if it's not part of a final approved document, they can actually delete it, replace it. They have the ability to send it over to EDMS. When they do that, it says it's queued for import, and this is our test server, so it's going to stay queued. But once it's processed, there'll be an EDMS number, which is the EDMS is the, tell me what the right term is. It the file of record? Is that correct?
The EDMS is our archival system. So it's responsible for historical storage, disaster recovery, all of those elements.
So once it's in the EDMS system, which is the Electronic Document Management System, it will get a unique number. That number is linked to the file in the EDMS system. It's the same file, but if you wanted to view it from the EDMS system, you could, if you're sitting in a DOT office, you'll be able to use that link. If you're external to DOT, it'll warn you and say this link only works within DOT. Once it's in EDMS, that makes it available to other systems, like, for example, the Project Suite Enterprise Edition, which districts use to manage projects through various phases, and it'll appear in that system as well. And that's also a nightly export and sync to those systems. They're able to create certain documents within SWEPT. For example, the scope of services. They can click the edit button, and that will give them to an interactive scope of services tool where they can draft those and export that to a Word file that they then use for their scope of services. Again, the Type 2 checklist they would complete through an online form. The environmental document submittal form, they would do the same thing. As those documents are approved, a PDF of those documents is generated and put into the file. This is where they do their certification form, environmental certification form, and then just kind of scrolling through, you can see the various categories we have of files, and this is how they maintain their project file. I'm going to scroll down below that and show you there's a correspondence section. So anything that they've uploaded that they've tagged as this is correspondence would appear in this section, and it would be the same link to the file, but also include who it's from, who it's to, and the date. And then anything that they've said is an attorney work product, only the district members would see this section of confidential attorney work products, and they would be listed below. And then at the end of the project page, you have the approval history. So we're on our testing server, so that the approval history on production will look a little more complete, but you would have the type of submittal, so whether it's initial or request for approval. Is it a Type 2? Is it reeval? Is it an EA, FONSI, whatever it is? The actions, again, this is old test data, so the actions would be submitted, certified, approved, those type of things. When it happened, who it was completed by, the role of the person. Typically, that would show the PM or the district environmental manager all the way up to the OEM director, and then they have the ability to put in comments when they approve. So you'll see that as well. And I'll show you an example on production so you can see a more realistic one. But I'm gonna you can hit. I'll take it back because I'm gonna facilitate how we go through the process. So I'm gonna take it and show you guys. Yes, the comments are retained with the approval. On the approval where they submit their comments, that was the question. And the answer is yes. You're welcome. Well, let me make myself a presenter. Okay. So early on when you heard Katasha and you heard really mostly Katasha, I think she's the one who focused on everything. We'll talk about how we implement it. As you can see, there's a lot of information up on the screen. I'm going to go through some of the details, but kind of how it walks through. But at a high level, just so you guys can see what I'm about to go through, is we've got the various classes of action. So this is the Type 1, we've got the Type 2, we've got the EAs and EISs, and then we have the reevaluations. And subtypes within there, whether we're doing an initial review or final review, and the various concurrence, internal review, final review, in each one of these rows. Then we talk about whether or not there's a requirement to go into the ERC review, which is that electronic review comment system, their development of the routing sheet, that environmental document submittal, the district approval, getting that certification from the leaders in the districts, as well as following up to the OEM approval. So
as I go through each one of these spots, so we looked at the type 1 and the type 2. So type 1, right, it's something that's handled down in the districts. They go through their internal review, their internal QA/QC. We put the controls on the form itself. You'll see an updated form relative to that, but it does not move up past the district QA/QC's piece. We come back obviously on our self-assessments. You guys come back on your audits, all sorts of great things beyond that. But that part is delegated down and has been for as long as I've worked here 16 years. I don't know that it's ever been not that way. Type 2s, we've got the initial review and then route for signatures. So think of route for signatures as approval process. And the part that I just want to kind of point out, because it's fairly consistent, is that it'll kind of show through the numbers how they're going to step through the process and where within SWEP they're actually doing things. So when you see things like the EDS, you're going to select submittal type equals initial, your document type equals type 2. These are instructions to our user as they're filling out the form. That I've got this, and I'm at this point in the process. How do I need to fill it out so I route it correctly? How does it get the right signatures? And you know, as it completes that initial review, then it comes right back around, and then now we're updating and completing it. But now you'll notice the submittal type is now request for approval instead of initial, and still routing the type 2, and it's going through, and the form has to be approved, and the type 2 has to be approved before it even crosses over this barrier where the project delivery coordinator has to confirm that it's ready. That passes it on to the administrators. They have, you know, a period of time to do their review. These other folks are included based on the project specifics and all that, and then the director finally. So this is just a blow up of what the rest. I'm going to show you these other ones right here. I think I show them over and over again. Oh, I gave you guys a lot of details on the EDS. So what I did was the next couple slides are how do we do the environmental document submittal. Sorry, I jumped in my brain. I just trained people yesterday. I'm going to train other people tomorrow for completely different things. But we wanted to talk through that process on here. How do you make sure you got things going to the right folks? And one of the things that we wanted to be able to tie to folks was the idea that, you know, if we had something that was an EIS with significant impacts to 4F resources, then we've got to make sure in that same approval process, things are not optional. People aren't optionally included. They are required included. So based on the nature of what has to be looked at, they can optionally be added just based on the uniqueness of the project. But if there are specific triggers that require, okay, it has an individual 4F, it is an EIS. You can't circumvent any kind of the process. These folks have to be involved, and what you'll see is they get pulled in to have the same discussion at the same time. So what that means is this person confirms it. It's determined that legal sufficiency is required. It goes to all three of these groups at the same time, and it can't go to this person until all of these equal recommend for approval, right? They will have had to have worked everything out below, and they will have to have had the assurances. Think about that routing sheet. You know, before the person with authority signs it, everybody below them, but I've taken a look at it and signed in their particular spot. So that's what this slide is just talking to know that we have some internal controls dealing with that. They're creating their environmental document submittal. You saw some of those forms on here, how to get to it on the project page, how to get to it on the main form, and then how it kind of routes through. We saw some of those directions before, depending on who you are, what you're going to need to complete. So we've got project editors drafting things. We've got the project manager who has to review it and approve it. It's got to come from this person to move on to the district leadership who has to be able to review and approve it. They have a certification. In order to move on past the district process, both leaders in the district have to provide that assurance, that certification indicating that they've reviewed the materials and that it's ready to proceed into the OEM project delivery coordinator's mailbox for our internal verification and review again before it moves on through our process as well. The similar language of how those things are tied. So in this particular case, we're looking at EAs and EISs. Again, it's the same process, right? They've got to go through that internal review that happens in ERC. They work it all out through comment resolution. Eventually, they need to route it up for signature, and it goes through the same folks to move through all of the various levels of QA, QC, both at the district as well as up here. Within the environmental document submittal form for the EAs and EISs, it's very similar to the Type 2. They're doing a request for approval, and based on the nature of what they're requesting to be approved, that will change the type of document cover page that's ultimately being signed by our director. So if it includes, if it's a FONSI, if it happened to include a final Section 4F evaluation, then that's the selection. Certainly if it was one of the draft products in between, the selection would be different. It wouldn't be that one up there. So these are obviously pull downs, and you make lots of selections based on who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and opportunities to provide additional details about what's being approved and what ends up on the cover sheet, things like that. These are samples of the various pull downs. So depending on where you are and what you're in the process, what you're trying to accomplish, and each one of those relates to various templates that are approved to document in the approval what it's actually approving. So all of those various things are there. For reevaluations, you've got the similar process, except for it's a three-prong. You've got ones that could potentially go concurrent. That's through coordination with the district, specifics on the project. Maybe you just did a design reeval and literally a construction reeval 6 months later, nothing's changed. There could be lots of reasons to kind of go that particular route in coordination. Then there's there's changes. People need to look at it, needs to go through the full process, and they do. They go through the process, and it's got all the various timelines on there.
This might be a good time to ask a question on this.
What's your question?
What is the difference between environmental certification and approval?
So when we do the environmental certifications, that's after the NEPA document is done, and it becomes a document in our project file from our district environmental managers that says, yes, on that project, we completed your NEPA process. That's their certification.
When we authorize the project, we need environmental
certification in the file.
Right. Say it says it's been cleared. Like we got to do it for railroads and utilities, right away, and environment.
Yeah.
In the project approvals report, there are a number of them that are.
So interestingly enough, so interesting.
I just want to make sure that it's clear to everyone.
I'm glad you said that. So what I've been texting back and forth. I told you I'm working in stuff at the same time. And when you first logged in, you said, I have 1,000 of these things. And I said, oh, I have 800. And I said, well, what the heck is the difference? And it's because, you know how you originally wanted the PDF? And then you said, no, really, I'd rather have the Excel. So in the PDF, we filter out things that aren't like that, like the environmental certifications. In the Excel, I think we sent you a couple that had environmental certifications on it. They should have been filtered out. Okay. So that's the big difference in numbers. Is that I think 95% of them are environmental certifications. They're not approvals. They're literally that certification document that says that process occurred. That's really all they're certifying. That process occurred, whatever it was. Like a Type 2 was done and approved on that date. And you need it for the file to kind of move on.
Big difference.
Yes, big difference. Thank you. You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions on this? Otherwise, I'm going to let Mike start going through some of the more detailed portions, just to kind of show you some of the things that we've worked on. Okay, let me switch it back to Mike. There you go, sir.
All right, thanks, Pete. So again, I'm logged in to our testing and training server. I realized that I skipped over a few details on the landing page. The districts do have an alerts box right on their landing page where they can see various items that need their attention. Here's one: complete an environmental certification on a project. They also have listings of projects that they're assigned to, as well as all projects within their region, and they can jump to those project pages with the FM number links. And then we talked about the alerts. This is an alerts page, and this goes into more details about what the alerts are. A lot of these are something changed in work program, so now it's been updated on your project. You need to complete a certification. So those are what typically the alerts would be. They can search those and find more information.
Well, and I think just to kind of hit on that for a second, Mike, and I know you had said it earlier. So one of the things that we do, certainly within the SWEPT application, is that all of these projects exist in our work program database. In order to even go in here and create a type 1, a type 2, or anything else, the FM number, the financial project number that they're using, must exist in the bank. Okay? They can't even go and do a project setup. They can't just make up an FM. They've got to actually have an FM. The FM has to exist, and there are large portions of the project information that come from the bank that say, this is your project. For instance, when you log on to the site, if you see information about the project and it didn't have like the edit button, like it's not like ETDM number or stuff like that, that's information that came from the department's work program database. So the project name, the work mix, all these various things, we know it has to. That's sort of another big control we have in place, is that you're not just, this isn't just a paper file you can write a number on somewhere else. It's connected to our work program database, and that FM, that financial project number, equates to a project that's funded, that's in that work program database and exists.
Okay, I'm going to jump into some of the bigger changes we've made since last year. One of the biggest ones is on the Type 1 form, and this is an example of a PDF of what the old Type 1 form looked like. And it had questions, yes or no, and then someone has put in some funny text underneath for the answers. But this is, again, yes, this is on our testing center. Each question, it just had a free text box and a yes or no answer, and then you were able to provide one or more attachments per item. And so what we've done now, I'll demonstrate. It's a more detailed level of question and answer that sort of lead to the appropriate documentation that's required. So they start by typing in at least the item and segment number, and then they can choose the appropriate FM.
They could also edit one they've already started. They could choose to create a new one, whatever the case is.
And so they're able to put in related FM numbers if there are some. The work program data is pulled in automatically.
So Mike, let me talk about related FMs, because I think this might be one of the only spots they didn't see it. So one of the things we do for document retention is we ultimately need to know how long are we going to hold this stuff. One of the things we recognize that happens is that project FMs can change over time or be split different ways, and you want to be able to correlate that original FM to all these other future actions, so you know when all the future actions are closed out, so then you know how long you need to keep the documentation. For instance, what we've said and what you guys reviewed and approved is that we're going to keep all NEPA-related documentation for an approval until 5 years after the last element of the project reaches closed. So each thing is tied to an FM. The FM has a life. It's a bank account. That bank account gets spent. Eventually, everybody compares all the books, and eventually on every one of those FMs, they reach a status called closed. So within this system, when you have that FM and you have related FMs, we connect all those FMs and we have reports between us and work program that monitor all those FMs, and they tell us interactively which ones reach status closed. So we know for this project it has these 3 sub-projects. They're related. We keep track of that parent and those 3 subs until each one of them reach status 10 closed. Once it, or 50, I'm sorry. Once it reaches status 50, that means closed. When all of them reach closed, then we start counting the clock 5 years. If something else pops up and it's related to something we've already looked, we wipe the timer and we start over again. But as long as everything that's connected reaches a status 50, which equals closed, then we start counting our 5 years.
And at the end of the 5 years, the files can be purged.
That's right. We've met our retention.
And so this is just showing you the work program data that's pulled in. They can select if it's a lab project or not. Here's where they select the CE type. So this is similar to what they did before. So they can put in a project description. And then we have a new area where it talks about the regulations, and they are asked to verify 1 or 2 statements. So if they, depending on if it's a C, 26, 27, or 28, or a D-list project, if it's not one of those, there's just one statement to verify. This action will not induce significant impacts to planned growth or land use for the area, travel patterns, air, water quality, or cause substantial controversy on environmental grounds. They cannot proceed with the form until they've verified that statement. For the C26, 27, and 28 and D-list projects, there's an additional statement. The action will not cause changes in interchange access control, result in major traffic disruptions, which there's a definition provided when they hover, due to the construction of temporary access or the closure of existing road, bridge, or ramp. So again, before they can move on, they have to verify both statements, and only once they've done that does it go into the questions. And then the questions are more interactive than they were before. Before they were just a question and a yes, no. Now they have to answer, is it within the existing right-of-way? Is it a minor acquisition without relocation or displacement? Any acquisitions with relocations and or displacement. So if they, depending on how they answer, they may have to coordinate with OEM and document the date that they coordinated. The level of documentation required can change depending on how they answer the question. So if the comment is optional, it will say optional. If it's required, it will say required in red. And when they provided the appropriate documentation, they get a checkbox, a check mark. So then wetlands, this maybe has a little more interactivity we could see. So either it's no wetlands present, no impacts, nationwide permit, general permit, or standard permit. Again, they have to provide data coordination. And I'm going to actually move down to species. So with species, if they say ESA species listed present, the follow-up question is determination of no effect or used key, no consultation required. If they say determination no effect, they have to enter the names of species. And until they do, they don't get their green check mark. And so forth for the rest of the question. So you can see it's, again, guiding them to provide the appropriate documentation for each question. I think that goes back to one of the questions we had earlier, addressing some of the things that were noted last year.
So to get to that finding of no effect on ESA, is species. Is that the biological assessment that you've done, or is that coordination with?
I think it depends on the project. They should have documentation in the file to substantiate whatever the selection.
Is that uploadable at this point?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then some selections will actually kick them out of a type 1. So example here is they said consultation with U.S. Fish or NMFS results in a may affect or likely to adversely affect, and it's a C26, 27, or 28 or D-list project. By checking that box, it does not meet the criteria of E and cannot proceed as a type 1. So it can't even be approved with this set of selections. So I can go into more details on any of these that you like.
I think that's probably a good one. Leave it right there just for a second. Because one of the other things that I think is sort of important is the answer. So one of the things Mike showed you is that you're expected to think and you're expected to answer the question intended to provide an affirmative statement, and if it requires documentation be uploaded or information be put into the text box that's required. When he talks about those little check marks over at the right-hand side, you can't even move the project on at the next point in the process till every single one of those check marks exists. So can't move on to move to an approval stage until it's already been QAQC. The check boxes are all activated. And then it's up to the various processes to review. So we have some controls in place. The compensating controls are the people that are intended to review these things. But the things where we could definitively say, nope, that's got to be there. Hey, nope, that selection kicks you out. We're handling those pieces, and we've designed it in such a way that we're expecting the answers that are needed to support why a particular selection was made.
Noel, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I think this is a great spot to do it. So what I remember from last year and some of the discussion that we were having, and these changes are definitely reflective, I think, of what you guys heard from the team, and I think it's good. But from what we're going to see this year doing the audits, will we be able to see sort of this thought process with our level of access? I mean, are we going to be able, I mean, I know it's going to be approved and finalized on whatever project we're in, but are we just going to see kind of a final version of the tab that all this stuff won't be visible, or will this be visible to us so we can kind of say, okay, if we have, you know, this checked, and we see this documentation, or rather don't see this documentation, will we be able to see that level of detail? Is what
you
I'm
won't
saying?
be able to see the interactive form. You'll see the resulting approved PDF. Because that's what happens. Ultimately, it ends up in a approved PDF with everyone's signature on it that substantiates that this is what the type 1 was, and that's the approval. It's the interactive pieces for them to work through to get to that point. You'll see it all laid out the same, and based on what their choices are, you'll see the elements that are included or need to be included based on what their selections are. And as you look at each type 1, you'll see the different choices reflected in the uniqueness of what that project is, but you won't have access to the interactive form to see all of those choices. Although I would encourage you, 1, to watch this again, or 2, we've got the type 1 videos that are out on our site that show you all the choices and how they play.
I think that's important. Joe, you're in the room. Stop me if you think I'm going too far, but I think that's important for us to know, because as we're reviewing these things, knowing the level of effort that's going behind the PDF that we're going to see, I think is of key importance to the review team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So so interestingly enough, attached to this particular meeting, the one you're connected to right now, I did attach an agenda, and on the back of page 2 of that agenda are physical locations where we're storing all these videos to kind of point you to these sources of information. So we'll make sure they're included in future correspondence as well, but there's, like I said, very quick videos at these various locations that can very quickly allow you to come up to speed on what the expectation was when it was filled out and what all the various choices were.
We did do one for the type 1, the new type 1 form, and we did go through each question.
Yep.
So if there was if we have a higher level document that initially started out as a type 1 but tripped a trigger and resulted in that, would that history as the initial CE1 be there that we could see, or is that not going to be?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think if it ever. And that's an interesting question. So the way that the project setup is set up is it's tied to the development of this FM number. If that FM number started as a type 1 and then became a type 2, it would depend on how they initially set it up and whether or not they kept anything from the type 1 and added it to the type 2 file. Because the first thing they're going to do is they're going to do a project setup and they're going to start developing their type 2 checklist. Whether they attached some of the previous stuff for the type 1, I'm not sure. I would think it should be in the file, but I don't know that for sure that it would be. Like if they got to a point and they said, nope, sorry, you're kicked out, you're going above, they coordinate with OEM. OEM would be like, yeah, that's type 2. We tell them to go right back in and start a type 2 checklist.
I think.
I don't know that it's erased. I just don't know if it's immediately accessible.
Okay.
I'd like to build on that thought because I think it's very intriguing. So like pre-assignment, let's just say, let's classify something from, like a C onto an EA or an EIS. I would have expected that there probably would have been some correspondence back and forth from a class of action determination standpoint between the division office and FDOT's central office. So kind of like this, in saying that, in this case, so let's say you have to upscale one from a class of action perspective. Do you think that's something that you guys would get involved with at headquarters there to work with your districts to have that sort of documentation event?
They would. They would absolutely, because one of the first things it says is, this doesn't qualify as that, go give us a call. Let's talk about it on the form itself. And so they would have those discussions with our folks here. Like I said, there's project delivery coordinators assigned to each district, which are intended to be the first line of communication. And then we have the monthly coordination meetings. But I suspect they'd pick up a phone, they talk about the project specifics, and then they chart a path forward. And then depending on how that interaction was identified, I'm sure that there's some evidence in the file. I just don't know whether they took notes or whether they saved an email or whatever.
Memo to file or an email or something would be possibly.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable to me.
Yeah, I think because the type 1 itself, in that example, wouldn't have reached approval. You would that type 1 PDF would
would never generate.
Could not have been generated
because we control to make sure it doesn't. But
they would have the ability to document any correspondence or whatever the decisions were and place those in the file.
I would like to compliment your work in these controls. I note that last year these weren't there. I mean, you can clearly see the differences with these controls. I commend that.
Thank you. And just to hit on Derek,
it started out as an EA or something and downgraded to its type 2.
Yeah, it'd be in the file. They would absolutely have it go in the file. That's why I just think it's interesting to go from a type 1 to a type 2. I'm assuming that they have that. Certainly going down requires a lot more coordination than in the file. I think they both do, but I just don't know how they're doing it today in practice. But it should be in the file. Whether it's an email or we met on this date and it's notes from that conversation, whatever it is.
So with that, I mean, we could go into the reevaluation form. We've made similar changes on the reevaluation form where it's more question-driven. It used to be kind of a table format, and I think I have an example up here somewhere.
I have a few open.
Pardon me.
Maybe.
Yeah. So on the old one, the old form, if you remember, I'm going to skip over some of the preliminary stuff that hasn't changed, but in the evaluation of changes to impacts, it was this table-driven thing where it was yes, no for have there been changes in impacts, a short blurb for supporting information that was supposed to refer you to another document. and that's what it was for all those issues. In the new form, the new reeval form, it is question-driven. So are there changes in impacts, yes or no, and then box and comment, and I'm going to hopefully get to one that has some follow-up questions. Are there changes for protected species? And so describe change as appropriate, provide update to mitigation status, and upload support and documentation. So more directed them to what is the documentation that needs to be provided, an inline upload button, and then a comment area. So,
and again, you see words like required. So you see required, you can't go any further. It requires it. Like, you can save it as a draft, you can come back, but you could never move it past you in the process.
At some points, these are optional. So she said there's no change in impacts, utilities, and railroads. You can provide additional details and upload support and documentation as appropriate, but it's not required. And various other changes like that throughout the form to kind of direct them on what's expected and the appropriate level of documentation.
So I'd say log out and just log in as an FHWA.
Yes, we can go directly to SWEPT as FHWA, and
yeah, he's got a few.
He's tab driven.
He's tab driven.
Not usually a multitasker, except when it comes to the web browser. So
you have 5 kids. 4 kids.
Yeah,
you got a lot.
You're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead. So this is what you'll see when you log in to SWEPT. It is a streamlined view. We wanted to get you right to the universe of projects that are being audited. So it is this project approvals report for May 1st, 2017 to April 30th. By default, it shows 10 entries. As we know, there's hundreds of projects. You can just say show all, and then you're going to be viewing all of them.
I can just take that and export it as Excel.
There is an Excel button. There's a PDF button as well. Let's say you want to do 100 at a time. There's a paging mechanism at the bottom. You can page through 100 at a time. You can filter these down.
So we're all going to need to know to change that default from 10 to all. So.
No.
No, when we get here as team members, you're going to have a list of projects that you're assigned. When you get to this page, all you really need to do is take that FM number that you've been assigned in the project description, type it in there, and it'll take you just to that one project.
That is probably the fastest way to go about it.
Then you're there, and then you open the project and start reviewing.
You can also type in a project name, COA. So let's say you wanted to look at all of the type 2. Just type in the number 2. So it's matching on the text of the word of the letter.
Yeah, but I do want to just follow up on exactly what Joe said, which filled to the top. It sounds like how this FHWA audit team interacting with this site is going to work is that big giant list of all those projects that are in there. He's going to then use whatever criteria to divvy out who's responsible for what set of projects. Probably going to use some standardization, probably going to make some guesses on higher level documents. Everyone's going to review it all, depending on what the issue is. He's going to give each member of the team a set of FMs with some details tied to it. And when they log in with their username and password, they're going to go to that FM field right there at the top. They're going to start typing in their FM. And as each digit you type, the choices get less and less. It will come down to one project. That's your project that you're working on. And then you just have to remember for yourself, hey, I've already looked at that one project. Now let me move to my next one.
And that will work regardless of whether it says show 10 entries.
Absolutely, 100%. It's looking at the entire universe.
Quick question on
At the universe when you get to this point, but you're only worried about that and projects that are assigned to you, that one project that you're referring, that's why you'll go through the FM number.
Yep. Was there a question?
Quick question. So the functionality of your individual buttons across the entry fields across the top there, will it accept a copy / control V paste function? So if let's just say Joe sends us an Excel sheet or an email with the list of our projects, can I do a control C on what he sends us and a control V there to instead of typing it?
Matter of fact, that's a great process improvement. The answer is yes. If he sends it to you in an Excel sheet, which I think is probably the best way to do it, copying and pasting that from the Excel directly into that field will absolutely work. One thing I'll just tell you to make sure you do or don't do is make sure you don't inadvertently have like a leading space or an ending space. I think a leading space is the only thing it cares about. If you have like if you happen to paste in with a leading space, it might not be able to find it.
I was just checking that, and
it still finds it anyway. It trims it down and finds it anyway. That's how awesome we are. Okay.
There it is.
There it is.
I can do it.
Cool.
Yeah, good. But that was a really good suggestion on the Excel as well, because you're right. Nobody wants to type, and if you type, you're introducing errors yourself, potentially.
Right.
So,
right. And we don't want to do that.
Yep, that's perfect.
And you can use the sort functions if needed, the other filters if needed.
Type in Irma.
Oh yeah, he likes to do that. Good old Irma. Lots of
How many projects did you guys have as a result of Irma?
I stopped counting. It was several hundred.
My initial setting up the statistics on this pulled 1,204 projects, 655 were. I filter under project some text, just the word Irma.
Yeah.
There were 655 out of 1,200.
I think if you go back and take out those environmental certifications that showed up in a couple of those spreadsheets for you, it'll knock it down significantly, because like I said, we pulled it out of PDF. We did not pull it out of the Excel, and that was probably my fault. I think I'm the one who said, "Oh, you want the Excel? Let me give him the Excel," and I just pulled it right out.
I just want to point out one other
329 environmental steps.
Okay.
One other key thing, you can click on the FM number, and you should click on the FM number to get to the project page, which we demonstrated earlier. This is going to have all of the project files, and you can see here, this is a type 1, so here's your approved checklist. It has 5 supporting documents, and those same supporting documents are listed in the folder structure under their appropriate category. And let me show you type 2. So for the COA column, just so you don't get confused, the COA is the class of action of the project. The document may be a type 2 or a reeval. And then let's say you had a type 2 that was done in SWEPT and a reeval for the same project that's done in SWEPT. You're going to see both of those listed, and so you'll be able to refer back to the type 2 documents, the original PD&E environmental document, as well as the reeval document.
Well, and that's actually a good point, just so everybody knows. The way that we ask and require projects to be set up in SWEPT is that the initial FM that you're setting up is the original PD&E FM, the original FM that PD&E was done under. Because later on, you are doing reevaluations, but it's reevaluations of that original PD&E. So the way that they're structured, and you'll see them in here when you start looking, and you pull up one that's a reeval.
Yeah, I thought that I had one.
You can, because there should be, yeah.
May have to flip through a couple of these, sorry.
No, you're good. Just find one that's a reeval. You'll see it have the original PD&E at the top. Scroll down.
Be the original PD&E, and then
scroll down. The original one's up there. This is all the original documentation, and then we have a section that says reeval.
And this tells you the design. It's for this.
So for reviewing a reevaluation, we get the FM number, type it in.
Yep.
We've got to make sure we're looking at the reeval documentation
part. That's right.
But if we want to, there's that other reference of the old stuff there.
That's right.
Refer to.
That's 100% true, because depending on the nature of the reeval, you know, a lot of what it came from may be still there, depending on how long it is and whether or not they updated things. But that's sort of the intent, is that the document itself is the original project development environment document, that type 2, that EA, the EIS, whatever the case may be. The reevaluations are coming back and looking at that document's decisions for reeval. So the reevals happen, right, on every segment that's being advanced. So on a project, you may have several reevals, not just on this one segment as it moves through the process, but on other segments that are advancing and things that are advancing at different points in time, but they all relate back and are all part of the original.
Yeah. This is an example of one of those. So the type 2 here was uploaded from 1988.
That's a long time,
there
right?
For you. There was a
old one, right?
Yeah. And it has a couple of different reevals, one from January 2017, one from March 2018, and then you'll see, I'm just going to scroll to the approval history.
No changes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a reeval that was done in 2017. Here's where it got all the way up to an initial, then a request for approval. OEM approved it under the past director. And then in December of that year, another reeval was done. That got all the way to approval. And then I think they're actually currently working on one for that project as well. Lots of different reevals for different phases on the same project.
You didn't have to do a true reevaluation, you had to do a consultation.
It'd still be there. Yep. Yep, they're still filling out the same form. It's going through the same, well, they're filling out the same form, they're putting in the same documentation. The difference is they're getting concurrence from us that they're documenting that it's okay to be a consultative reeval. But other than that, they've developed it in here and all the documentation's in here. I can tell you right now, there aren't any like that in there yet. They've all come here. You won't find any of it stopped down there. Not within this reporting period. I don't even know of any yet.
And do look at the, what's that?
On the District 7's doing one on the TIS.
Oh, okay. Have fun with that, though, sure.
So it'll tell you the segment advancing and the phase above the reeval PDF, so you'll be able to tell this is for construction add-on segment 4, this is for construction add-on segment 3, and kind of keep them separated that way.
So we've eaten up into your time. It is, Derek, sadly, we are at the 4 o'clock. We took up the time, man. Do you guys have other questions? Do you have anything else you want to see? I hear some folks dropping off because everybody's very busy. It's 4 o'clock. Get out of here. We're happy to stay around and answer any questions. We're also happy to let everybody go. It's completely up to you guys.
I'm getting Windows 10 installed today. That shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, yeah, you don't need to go back.
Well, not for SWEP. Maybe a problem for others.
No, it'll work. It'll work for us.
Windows 10 today.
How about anybody else out there? Does anybody have any questions on us? I will reiterate, we're always available. You can call us whenever you want. We want you to know the information. We're going to, we have recorded this. We will make it available on the web for you guys and forward you the links. I will tell you when you watch the video, I think I wasn't sharing my screen the first few seconds that our director was talking, and it wasn't until Lewis told us, hey, are you sharing your screen? And I quickly turned it on. So when you watch the video, the first few minutes may just be the voice out in the darkness of our director kind of talking before the rest of the visual comes in, but we've been perfect since then. Anything?
We're going to get our username, passwords.
You should have it in an email already.
All right. Okay.
Yep. When you arrive back at the office with your Windows 10, you should have a username and password with a link to be able to get to the site. Anything else from anybody else? All right. Well, we appreciate everybody's time, and again, if you need anything, we're happy to help you. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.